In the spring of 1912, Sergei Rachmaninov, nearing his 40th birthday, was one of the most distinguished musicians in Russia. He was admired as a composer, conductor, and dynamic pianist. Recently, he had given a series of concerts and recitals that marked his greatest successes to date, and he had supplanted himself at the head of Russia's contemporary music scene. So it was not uncommon that he should have ardent admirers or fans in the early 20th century sense of the word. Rachmaninov was often greeted by young admirers wherever he performed, and it was not uncommon for young female admirers, nicknamed Rachmaninostok, to hide away and need to be removed from inside his large black carriage. Rachmaninov also commonly received letters of praise and admiration, and for years a mystery woman had been sending him bouquets of white lilacs wherever he played or stayed. It was around this time that Rachmaninov received a letter from another anonymous admirer. There was nothing unusual about the letter that praised and asked to communicate with Rachmaninov, except the sender seemed to be quite young and had concealed her identity behind the musical note "Re." Intrigued, Rachmaninov replied to the letter, embarking on a regular correspondence that would grow into a unique collaboration and friendship, and lead Rachmaninov to compose one of his most beautiful works. But who was Re, and why had she contacted Rachmaninov? At first, Rachmaninov did not know, and even worried about the well-being of the young woman. "Is there anything wrong?" he wrote back. "Are you ill? Why does a certain sad impression emanate from your letter?" But while sadness was the very reason why she had contacted Rachmaninov, it was not her own. The truth was that Re was a 23-year-old idealistic Russian poet named Marietta Shaginian, and she had contacted Rachmaninov because, like many admirers, she cared and was worried about him. As she explained years later, it was in these very years of wide recognition and good fortune that Rachmaninov was seriously ill with doubt in himself, and the youth of Moscow knew this. Marietta was accurate in her assessment of the older Rachmaninov. Despite his success, he constantly required self-validation and encouragement. He also battled serious bouts of depression, disillusionment, and was prone to not only lose his inspiration for music, but also could fall into an unproductive stupor of helplessness. "I have no faith in myself," he confided in Marietta. "Teach me to have faith in myself, dear Ray, even half as much faith as you have in me." For a short while, Marietta did just this. Though concealed until after his death, she was Rachmaninov's source of inspiration and purpose during his last years in Russia before the 1917 revolution. Rachmaninov and Marietta only actually met a few times, but they corresponded with weekly regularity. None of Marietta's letters to Rachmaninov remain. Presumably, they weren't something Rachmaninov wanted to leave around the house. But his letters to her, obviously in direct reply to much of what she wrote, are filled with literary observations, discussions of the arts and music, reflections on life, and filled with terms of endearment and affectionate dalliance. It is clear that their feelings went past Marietta's testament of merely common intellectual interest. She undoubtedly loved Rachmaninov, and if nothing else, Rachmaninov was absorbed by her youth and idealism, and all she represented. On one occasion he wrote, "Beside my children and music and flowers, I love you, dear Ree, and I love your letters. I love you because you're clever and interesting and because you're not extreme. And I love your letters because every word in them breathes faith, hope, and love, that balm to heal my wounds." There is no evidence that their relationship was anything more than friendship. An illicit affair with a young poet certainly did not match Rachmaninov's personality. But it is clear that Rachmaninov cared deeply for Marietta and was greatly influenced by her. He was also musically resurrected by her exuberance and inspired by her youth, idealism, and the energy she had for life and the world. Indeed, he asked her at the beginning of their friendship in the spring of 1912 if she could provide him with poems, either original or classic, to which he could compose music. Some of the poems Marietta suggested resulted in 14 songs, Opus 34, of which the last, the Vocalise, is one of the most beautiful melodies ever composed. It has the air of romance or adagio, a sad Russian ballad, but there is no evidence that Rachmaninov, with Marietta's buoyancy and spirit pushing him forward, felt anything but ease and happiness as he composed it. He even wrote to her that the music came to him with the greatest of ease. In turn, Marietta dedicated her first book of published poems, Orientalia, to Rachmaninov in 1913. So how did it all end? In distinct and separate paths, for sure. With the 1917 revolution, Rachmaninov fled Russia, never to return, ultimately passing away at the age of 69 at his home in Beverly Hills, California. In stark contrast, Marietta became one of the Soviet Union's most celebrated writers, embracing the revolution and the communist state it brought forth. She not only survived, but was silently complicit with Stalin's Great Purge of the 1930s, denouncing Gorky and famously quipping, "Just because a few people have been arrested, they make all this fuss." She passed away in 1982 in Moscow at the ripe age of 93. There is no evidence that Rachmaninov or Marietta ever communicated again after 1917. Yet the Vocalise endures over 100 years later and remains Rachmaninoff's celebration of friendship, love as an ideal, and the great healing powers Marietta brought into his life.